Welcome everyone to week 11 of the Practice Recovery Acceleration Program. Dennis Marvel and I are so happy that you're here with us to continue on our recovery. I know most practices are back seeing patients and delivering our great services. This segment today is going to be continuing on with our phases of influence. At first, a few weeks ago, we were talking about patient engagement, and hopefully you're continuing to engage your patients through all the different modalities, whether it's phone calls, emails, text messages, social media, maybe even direct mail. There are so many ways to get our message out that we are a safe place to be and that we're serving our patients again. And then we talked about the patient experience and really diving into 5-star service and continuing to treat our patients at a higher level when they're in the practice, so they will continue to refer and love coming to see us. Now we're in the treatment acceptance phase and really taking a look at all those tools that you've learned throughout the years with Fortune Management of our tools of influence and our engaging the patients and having them say yes to treatment. So, because we don't want to just be triaging and doing emergency care, we're now doing full treatment. So Dennis is going to talk to us a little bit about this CEO hat that we've been talking about for the last few weeks.
Thank you so much, Kim, and it's a pleasure to see everybody. This week, the CEO needs to transition a little bit. In a normal, large, really huge company, the CEO has to just wear the CEO hat. In most of our practices, you also have another hat that maybe you're aware of and maybe you're not, and I'm going to call that one the COO, which is the Chief of Operations. And in this case, our CEO needs to get in the mindset of what do I need to do to return to normal operations? So along those lines, this idea of the phases of influence, what we're trying to do is get back to all of those things that made your practice great and differentiated you from all of the competitors that are out there in your marketplace. And so going back into the phases of influence and case acceptance and case presentation and all those things are helping you to return to those normal operations. But at the same time, we need to be able to look at our schedule and ask ourselves, are we operating at the most efficient schedule? Are we getting back to scheduling to goal? We're going to revisit some of these ideas back in the clinical director role, but what are all the things that are now operating differently than they used to? And there are some things like PPE and things like that that may continue on forever, which is fine, but we need to get back to those things that really make you an outstanding practice. So that's our focus for this week. Along those lines, we really want to make sure that we are now accelerating into the future. So if you look back at your May, most people's May, they started almost a month ago, so May 18th, today is June 17th, and when they look back at their May, they should have been about 70-75% of the prior May's actual adjusted production. As we get back into June, a lot of the practices that are really taking all the steps that we recommend are really on a record-setting pace where they're going to have one of the biggest Junes they've ever had, if not one of the biggest months they've ever had. So as you take and put on your CEO hat with your COO hat, ask yourself this question of what do I need to do to really accelerate and not only just get back to normal operations, but really get back into an aggressive growth mode. Along those lines, I want to give you some sourcing and accountability ideas. So all of you have heard this idea of sourcing and accountability in the 6 departments we have in a dental practice and having somebody in your practice that is the department head of each one of those divisions. I would like to add a couple to that list because that's really going to be the tools that help us to accelerate into the future. So the first role is the person I call the daily lookout. And this person's job is to look forward in the schedule to go, is my schedule maximized? Am I fully booked? Where are all my openings in the next week? And if that's the only question we all ask in our practices, it's going to make you that much more effective. Look at every single open unit you have in restorative, every single open unit you have in hygiene, and how can I fill those? And one person should be accountable for that. Often that person is the scheduling coordinator, and my goal is to have them look at tomorrow, 3 days from now, and exactly 1 week from now. And if they only look at those 3 days, recognize that when tomorrow becomes today, you're going to have a fully booked schedule. So that role of the daily lookout is really critically important. Then the next sourcing and accountability person would be the director of flow. And this person's job is to come in first thing in the morning, look at the schedule that's been built, and recognize that our front desk teams are really scrambling to try to get everybody back on the books, and they're working super hard to get as many people as they can and to accommodate things. So some of our normal structures and our schedule have kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. So the director of flow's job is to come in and look at the schedule today and go, this is where we're going to have a problem. This is where the assistants are going to have to jump into hygiene. This may be where hygiene needs to jump in and help restorative. Maybe somebody from the front desk team needs to come back and help us in this log jam that's about to occur. And the idea with both of these roles is really to anticipate what's coming before it actually gets there, with this idea of becoming proactive versus reactive. And so the flow directors, and there's one in every single practice I visited, there's one person on the team that just has this magical sense of knowing everything that's going on in every operatory, even if they're not in that operatory. They just have this expanded sense of awareness. And if you have one of those people on your team, they're the ideal director of flow, because they already get it, they already understand it, they can see it coming. And so if we get that person to connect with the front desk team and to connect with all the other players and say, this is where we're going to run into problems, that will make each and every day operate much more effectively. And let's go back to your basic rules of scheduling, of what happens if you don't start on time, what happens if you don't stay on time, then you don't get out on time. And in this day and age, when we're bringing people out of lockdown and all those things, being behind is actually it's almost being perceived as a level of disrespect by the patient. So we want to do everything that we can to really stay on top of that and to be in charge of all those things. The next source person is what I'm going to call the insurance enforcer. Now, one of the good news about being shut down all this time is most of us got our accounts receivable really cleaned up, and our insurance has all been billed and processed and all those things. The insurance enforcer's job is to look at every single claim that hit 21 days outstanding. And the reason for 21 is that in today's day and age of electronic claims and direct deposit and all those things, if you're really aggressive and if you're managing the process really well, you can actually get your insurance claim processing times down to 21 days, where it used to be 45 or 50 days. And by having an insurance enforcer that goes and looks at every claim that was filed 21 days ago that has not been paid yet, that person's job is now to identify those as problem claims, and you need to be using that language with your teams. This is a problem claim. We've got an issue with it. We need to figure out why it hasn't paid yet. And immediately follow up on those things. That's anticipating that you're going to have a problem and keeping those problems out of your 30 to 60 days and your 60 to 90 days accounts receivable. So really getting on top of the insurance processing. Now that we have all those past messes cleaned up, we don't have to deal with that anymore. Let's focus on keeping it super effective by identifying and asking for an insurance enforcer to volunteer. And then the final role is really one of the most important. And I used to call this the kind of manager of fun. And this was a person's job who was to make sure every day was enjoyable and it was actually a fun place to come to work. The term and the title has actually evolved over time, and one of our practices decided to call it the goddess of fun. It was the goddess of the day. And their job was to make sure that we all had a fun, enjoyable day and that we were engaging our patients on a really incredible level. I know another practice that has the queen of the day, and this person actually wears a crown in the practice. It's absolutely hilarious. But their job is to make sure that we're all interacting, we're all having a good time. And in this day where everything is new, that's more important now than ever. And if you want to start your days with some good music before your daily huddle, or a motivational video, or a joke of the day, or something like that, that's what the goddess of fun should do. And this one can be a rotating role. So somebody can adopt it for a week. People can choose to do it for a day. Or you can have somebody that actually adopts that role full time, whichever one of those suits your particular team and your practice the best. So by adding those different source people into the 6 you already have, this is going to enable you to really accelerate into the future and to really keep your acceleration moving forward. Now that you've regained momentum, we want to make sure we keep that momentum and not lose pace. So in that role, now we need to step into our role as the leader. And in the leadership role, this is where we really need to become the director of enrollment. And to go back to our large company example, most large companies have somebody, they call them the director of sales or something to that effect. And I prefer the word enrollment because enrollment is all about helping people get what they want, not necessarily selling them something they don't really need, or even if they need, maybe they don't want it. As a director of enrollment, you have to be the chief cheerleader to make sure your entire team is re-engaged in that enrollment process. Again, this is one of those items that's kind of been pushed off of our plate by all the new changes and protocols and procedures and all those things. And so as the doctors, you really need to lead that effort and step into that leadership role to become that director of enrollment. The second point I want to make is we really have to meet people where they are in this day and age. And you're going to have patients that have been really dramatically impacted by this thing. Maybe they've been laid off. Maybe they're a small business owner that's really struggling. They've got some financial issues that they didn't have 5 months ago. But you're going to have people that haven't been affected at all. Maybe they're just working from home. They're still doing their normal job. Nothing's changed for them financially. You're going to have people that have actually been impacted by the virus, and you're going to know family members and things like that. And it's very important to actually meet your patients where they are and be understanding of that, because as the director of enrollment, our job is to first off understand where they are and help them get to what they need. And we can't do that if we're really not figuring out where they are in the first place. The next step is to really examine your treatment presentation and what does that look like in this day and age. You know, we have been big proponents of actually having a treatment consultation when you're doing full mouth restoration or an ortho case or something like that. And now with all these new protocols and things, maybe you're doing a lot more case presentation in the treatment room, actually with the patient in the chair. And so you need to look at what has changed in that environment. So if you're used to doing case presentation outside of an operatory where you've got a big screen TV maybe hanging on your wall or something like that, we need to bring all those elements of case presentation now into the operatory if that's what you're doing. And as practitioners, one of the biggest things I notice a lot is that when you're doing treatment presentation in an operatory, your physiology actually changes a lot in that you're used to working with your hands together and kind of bent over in the certain physiology it takes to do dentistry, whether you're the doctor or the hygienist or the assistant. And to actually be really effective at treatment presentation, you have to have a more open physiology and be more engaged and connected with the patient. And sometimes that can be as simple as reaching across the operatory to point at a screen to actually share with patients the IO photos that your hygienist or your assistant just took. So be very, very aware of all the things that have changed in the way you're doing treatment presentation at this point in time. The fourth step is to really help get in touch with patients' values and rules. Most of you have been through our values and rules training program to help you identify what is somebody's core value, what's important to them about dentistry, and then what are the rules that they have on whether or not that value has been met. And that's something that's very different from all of us. And the one encouragement I really want to give everybody at this point in time is don't assume that everybody's values are the same as they were before. Last week, we started with some questions about, what's changed in your perspective on the world, what's different in the way you view your healthcare, what's changed in the way you view your oral health. Those are all helping to get in touch with those patients' values. But now we have to revisit the idea of what has to occur for that new value to have been met. So I really want to strongly encourage the message from last week to look at every patient as a new patient because they haven't been in 90 days. Let's re-engage with them in a new process and find out what's changed in their world and then meet them where they are. The next step is in handling objections. And if you watch the video with Shannon Richkowski, she did such a great job of helping us understand that you have to be really brave to be okay getting to an objection. And we're almost afraid of objections because that almost feels like a rejection of us personally, where the reality is there's something that's getting in the way of this person getting the treatment they need. And if I can uncover that and figure out what that is, I can then solve the problem. So don't be afraid of this idea of overcoming objections, and then know that you already have the tools, the skills, and the abilities to handle it. And if it's a financial concern that you don't know the answer to as a clinician, that's okay. Your front desk team can probably find a solution to that. So don't be afraid to uncover those objections and then handle them with your skills of elegant influence. And then the final step of the leadership role, and Kim is going to go into this in a little more detail in a minute, is really getting to yes. And in this example, you have to be the solution. You have to be the person that meets the patient's values. You have to meet their rules for whether those values are fulfilled. You have to meet people where they are, and you have to be the solution of their problem. And for somebody who's been negatively financially impacted by all these crises right now, maybe that's more of a phased treatment plan than they might have done 6 months ago. Maybe it's helping somebody get to a new level of health that they were resistant to earlier. Whatever that is, if you're actually going to be the solution to that as a human being and step into that role with them and help them get what it is that they want and they need, that's going to help you move your patients from this idea of from never to maybe to yes. So step into that leadership role boldly. Make sure you're participating in all 6 of these actual activities, and then re-examine your process based on everything you know now to re-engage with your patients on a totally new level. With that, I think it's very important for us to get in touch in the things that are what's most important to us and what's most important to our patients. So Kim, if there's anything you'd like to add to that little bit of conversation, or if you want to take it from here, jump on in.
Absolutely. Well, I love what this is all about because it's all about the relationship. And what we've been saying at Fortune for years is that you're going to differentiate yourself from every other practice by the context in which your patients experience you. And so much of that has to do with your communication and your relationships. And so all of this information, we'll dive into a few of these areas a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about some WMI questions, or what's most important questions. And many of you who have been through our Fortune seminars, especially the Marketing and Enrollment Mastery Seminar, we've dove into these. And so for some of you, this may be a repeat or a refresher, I should say. And for others, maybe it's the first time you've heard this. Before we go into the dental values, though, I want to talk to you a little bit about life values. And these past few months have given a lot of people some time to reflect and really think about their life and their business and their relationships and maybe their priorities. And so one of the things we do in the seminar, which, I really invite you to do this maybe with your team, is to take a look at what's most important to you in life. And there are many, many different values that we have in life. However, here are 5 values that are very common that come up for people. So security, success, adventure, freedom, connection, love and connection. So sometimes what we have you do in a seminar, right, is we have you rank these values in order of importance. And I would ask you, have any of these values changed for you? Maybe the order maybe has changed, or maybe the vehicle or what you need in order to get this value has changed. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So if security was your highest value before, or for a lot of people, we make it 2 people and security is their highest value. For one person, in order for them to feel secure, so you might say, so Jane, what has to have you feel, what do you need in order to feel secure? And she might say, I need to know that my husband's going to be there when I get home and that my foundational family unit is really strong. Great. And then for another person, Sally, she might have a high value of security, but in order for her to feel secure, she might have to have a certain dollar amount in her bank account for her to feel secure. So the point here is that you might have a different value. 2 people might have the same value. They might have a different way that they have that value be present in their life. So this is kind of a fun exercise that we take you through what's most important to you in life. And it dovetails then into our different values that we have in the dental office. Now, there are many, many different values that people come up with. And what we've done at Fortune is we've really looked at, there are clinical values, and then there are more relationship values, the relationship the patient has with the practice. And so when we're talking about our clinical values, we always, we teach you to, if you want to take this on, it's a great relationship tool. And by the way, most people think that other people have their values. So a lot of dental professionals feel like, well, of course, the health of my mouth is most important to me. It must be the most important to everybody else. That's not necessarily true. So these WMI questions, or what's most important questions, help us identify what's most important to the patient and link those values to the treatment that they need. Remember, with enrollment, a couple things. People buy for emotional reasons and they back it up with logic. So they may buy a really expensive car because it makes them feel successful and cool and sexy and professional or whatever it might be. However, they back it up with logic that it gets really great gas mileage and it's going to last a long time, right? So we live in dentistry. We live in the land of logic, and so we think, well, of course, there's a crack in the tooth, there's decay, they must get it fixed. However, a patient is thinking about making a decision more in a emotional way. And now with all this COVID and all the shutdown, people are maybe more emotional. So we've got to get in touch with their emotions and then link the treatment that they need with those values. And I think also we need to remember that certainly people have been hit hard with COVID, the shutdown. Many people have not. So you've got to meet people where they are, as Dennis was talking about in the earlier slide. So with some of our dental values, let's focus on our dental values. If you were to ask a patient, tell me, Mrs. Jones, and by the way, and Dennis mentioned this, you may have asked these questions 6, 12, 18 months ago. Things may have changed for them. Maybe they've been staring at their mouth for the last 3 months and they want to get that gap in their tooth fixed, or they're excited to do Invisalign now, or maybe that treatment that they've been putting off, they do want to do it because maybe their values have changed or maybe their priorities have changed. So what's most important to you in the dental care you receive, for instance? You could ask them, and you might get one of these 4 different values. Now, they may not come out and say, I want a high functioning mouth. They may not use the word function or aesthetics or longevity or comfort. However, you as a dental professional, you're smart enough to know that whatever they said is going to fit into one of these categories. Then the next follow-up question would be, tell me, Mrs. Jones, what has to happen in order for you to feel you have the most beautiful smile that ever existed? Or what has to happen for you to feel like your mouth is functioning for long lasting, forever and ever, for years to come? And then they're going to tell you their rule that supports that value. So what has to happen in order for you to feel like you are receiving blank, you are receiving the best functionality of your mouth, or you're receiving the most beautiful smile ever, and they're going to tell you. And then when you're presenting the treatment plan, you want to link those values. And then of course we have our relationship values. So then you can ask them, it's more about your relationship with the practice. So tell me, Mrs. Jones, what's most important to you in your relationship with us in our practice? And oh, by the way, pre-framing these questions is a great idea, because you know who doesn't ask these questions? Most dental offices. So you're differentiating yourself by asking these questions. And you may even say, you know, Jane, Mrs. Patient, we asked you these questions a long time ago. I want to ask you again though, because so much has changed. You can just pre-frame it. Or if it's a new patient or somebody you've never asked these questions for, you could say something like, you know, your experience at our dental office is going to be very different than another practice. We might ask you some questions that you've never been asked before. Do you mind if we ask you some of these questions? And of course, the patient's going to say, sure, no problem. And then you ask some of these questions. What I have found is that sometimes you're sort of shocking the patient. They really don't have the answer. So that's okay. Give them a few seconds. And if they still don't know, you can tell them they can think about it, because halfway through the visit, they may come up with their answer. And I've had some dental teams have a real fun time with this, where halfway through the appointment, the patient comes up with what's most important to them, whether it's clinically or in their relationship with the practice. So you've got to be patient, and you've got to be a little bit brave in asking these questions, because they're not normal. However, remember, you're differentiating yourself, and the practices that are using this information have said time and time again, our patients can't believe how personal our relationships have become because we ask these questions, and they're just a door that opens to building that relationship. And who knows where the conversation is going to go from here. So
Kim, I want to add in just a little bit. The comment you made about being patient is so critical, because we were actually role playing this scenario yesterday in a practice, and I'm sitting in a chair looking at a patient, and I asked the patient, what's most important to you about your oral health now that all this stuff in the world has changed? And the patient looked at me and said, I have no earthly idea. And I just sat there. And then she started talking, and she gave us a total complete answer, but she didn't think she knew what the answer was. And we actually have to give people time to process this stuff, because it's not a normal conversation. And if you do the pre-frame, like Kim suggested, and then give them the time to process it, you'll be amazed at what you hear.
I love that. Thank you for emphasizing that, because it is true. We know these questions, and we tend to want to just keep on going with the appointment. Remember, just a couple of seconds will help that hamster wheel inside that person's head go around, and then it comes to them. Well, let me tell you what's changed, or let me tell you what's most important to me. So I love that. Having patience is one of the most, well, having patience is really important, but having patience in these conversations makes you such an elegant communicator, and it has the patient really feel heard. So what's most important to you with your relationship? Like, how do you want us to be with you, Mrs. Patient? And they're going to come up with a couple of more relationship values. So this could be in the realm of cost and affordability. It could be around time or how convenient you are. It could be around, I just want to trust and know that relationship is really strong. And then, of course, so their relationship values are going to be in one of these three different categories. Again, they may not say cost and affordability. By the way, though, if they say something around money and then you ask them the next question, well, gee, what has to happen in order for you to feel like we've made this care affordable for you, or whatever it might be, you're going to get some really interesting rules that support the value. I'm actually going to go back one slide. So if they say time and convenience, they may not say actually time and convenience, but they say something around time. Gee, Mrs. Jones, what has to happen in order for you to feel like we've really honored your time? Well, there could be a bunch of different things. It could be, I want you to see me on time, not a minute late. Great, make note of that. It could be, I don't have a lot of time, so I want you to get as much work done at one time. Great, do quadrant dentistry, or maybe you do her restorative when she's also coming in for her hygiene appointment. So it could be also convenience. I want to be seen at a later time in the day or an earlier time in the day. So again, asking that second question, well, what has to happen in order for you to feel like we've really honored your time? You're going to get different answers for different people. Trust and relationship, boy, we hear a lot of values around. I want to know that my doctor has taken a lot of CE, and I want to really trust that they know clinically what they're doing. Or it could be about the relationship. I've just had such a strong relationship with you for so many years. I'm going to trust a lot of whatever treatment that you think is best for me. I'm going to trust that is the best for me as well. So what has to happen? What has to happen question, you've got to ask that so that you can really get the rule that supports that value. Dennis, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would. I want to revisit a question that we introduced a couple of weeks ago, or not really a question, a statement of when you get to a value in a rule, it's very helpful to lean into a patient and go, my commitment to you is to give you all the information you need in order to make a decision you're comfortable with. Because that totally puts patients at ease and with the comfort of this process, and it gives them ownership of the decision. And you'll be stunned how less frequently you hear things like, I need to check with my schedule, or I need to check with my spouse, because they know it's okay for them to go ahead and make a decision. And if they need more information, they'll tell you that. So don't hesitate to lead with that statement of, my commitment to you is to give you all the information you need to make a decision that you really feel comfortable with.
Absolutely. And it just solidifies that relationship and solidifies that decision for them to move forward with the treatment. The other logistical point I also want to talk a little bit about is you've got to make sure that when you are that you write this information down in the practice management software, you get all this great, rich information. Well, if you have thousands of patients, you might not remember everybody's values and rules. So making sure you're writing it down. And also, we talk a little bit about the 5 steps of enrollment, making sure when you do a handoff that those values are being communicated, whether you're writing it down or talking over the patient, and letting the other clinician, whether that's the doctor, the assistant, the hygienist, the administrative team member, know what the values and rules are so that they can continue to reinforce them. And then let's talk a little bit about the 5 steps of enrollment. Again, those of you who have been around Fortune for a long time have heard the 5 steps of enrollment. With all the PPE and all of the new protocols, sometimes I think we're maybe missing out on this richness of this process. So really it's all about, of course, establishing rapport. And we know that people communicate in different ways, whether you study their VAK, their modalities, their visual, auditory, or kinesthetic way that they communicate. Many people are real visual learners. So we need to make sure that we're matching and mirroring if they're in a visual state, or if they're in an auditory state, or if they're more in a kinesthetic state. We want to be matching and mirroring and asking them some great questions and really connecting with them and building rapport. And when you get good at this, you can build rapport instantaneously. Then, of course, just this conversation we've just had, discovering their values and rules and really understanding what makes them tick, because they are an individual and they are different than every one of your other practice or other patients, excuse me. So really getting those values and rules and writing them down, and then remembering them when you are giving them what they need. So in other words, telling them what treatment that they need and connecting with them on an emotional level, what this is going to do for them emotionally. Because remember, people buy for emotional reasons and they back it up with logic. So this is where we are going to be doing those value links. So linking our features and benefits that we have in our practice, whether it's a CEREC crown, we can do a crown in a day. We don't have to see you for 2 different visits, or we're going to eradicate your periodontal disease with laser, or we are going to be able to all the different types of technology and all the different skill sets in the practice. Maybe you've got some specialists in the practice, linking their value with the treatment that we have according to all the services that we have in the practice. Then get the commitment, get them to say yes. Are you ready to get this scheduled, Mrs. Jones? How does next week sound? And of course, getting back to what Dennis was talking about, looking at the flow and looking at our next couple of days and the next week of availability, getting them scheduled and making sure that you're taking care of them. And then last but not least, congratulating this patient. And I think sometimes we forget about this, and congratulating them when they make the appointment, not when they get the treatment done. Of course, you can do that as well. However, really making sure that when we're doing the handoff between the clinical team and the administrative team, that we're obviously connecting the values and the rules that the patients have, but also making sure that the admin team is congratulating this patient on really making their oral health a priority and making making a great decision for themselves. So that's the 5th step of enrollment. And I think what happens is that eliminates, or at least greatly reduces, that 2 hours or 2 week or 2 day phone call a couple days later, and with questioning whether they're going to follow through with the treatment. So anything else you'd like to say about the 5 steps?
Yeah, I would like to point out something in particular for those individuals that have been through our Mastering Enrollment program. Kim, you did an absolutely amazing job of demonstrating matching and mirroring when you were talking about establishing rapport, because you went from visual to auditory to kinesthetic, and you actually changed your patient's speech for each one of those audiences. And sometimes just doing that, just matching somebody's pace at which they talk, helps you to be totally aligned with them and establishing rapport. And then in the point about getting them what they want, remember to link that to their values and rules. It's like, Sue, can you see how this is going to help you to have a beautiful smile that you get to keep for the rest of your life? And then you can even connect it to the rules, going, when you told me that we needed to be able to provide you with optimum care to feel great about our relationship, can you see how it matches and meets all of those needs? And that's really where the congratulations comes into play. So if you didn't catch when Kim was doing that, replay this tape a little bit and go watch it again, because it was amazing.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Dennis. I'm very, very passionate. I love VAK. I love to match and mirror with people. I actually think it's kind of like a little game you can play and see how you can really go into somebody else's modality. Because remember, we're chameleons, right? We live in a certain modality most of the time. It's our comfort modality. I'm a high visual person, so I'm usually there. However, if I'm talking to a real auditory doctor, I'm using my arms less and my hands less, and I'm maintaining my speech in a more consistent tonality. And then if you're talking to an auditory person, a kinesthetic person, you are even more into your an emotional, slower paced communication style. So it can be really fun. And again, you're going to really have to use your sensory acuity here, because you may have a mask, they may have a mask. We don't know what kind of face shields we're going to be having. I know you're dealing with a lot these days with a lot more equipment. So this means you've got to turn up that sensory acuity even more. Handling objections is another thing, that is another area, another concept we teach in marketing and enrollment mastery. And this is as you mentioned, Dennis, kind of like what Shannon talked about last week, and really being brave and really isolating that objection. So this is really the step-by-step way of doing it. The first step, though, really happens between your ears, and it's all about your belief systems and believing that people will say yes to the treatment. Assume that they will accept the treatment. Again, we've mentioned this a couple times in some of our other weeks. Not everybody has lost their job. Unemployment, yes, has gone up, and we've seen it even come down a little bit because, especially like dental professionals, a lot of us have gone back to work. We've lived in this little dental world where we have had some challenges over the last few months. However, not all of our patients have had those challenges. A lot of people just got to work from home, depending on what their positions were. So a lot of them, they still have dental insurance and they still have money to pay for their dental treatment. So let's assume the acceptance. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure you identify the objection. So the objection, we might think always it's money, but it might not be money. They may not really know how the treatment's going to work. So tell me, what's preventing you from moving forward with this treatment right now, Mrs. Jones? And you're going to get what their specific objection is. So it may be, I'm not really sure how many appointments it is, or I'm not really sure how much it's going to cost me. Whatever the objection is, you're going to get it from here. And you might need, if she doesn't say yes, you might need to go on to the next question. You might need to ask a new question. So I guess, Mrs. Jones, what I hear you saying is, if we can figure out how to make this treatment affordable, if we can get you scheduled for this treatment and we can make this affordable, would you move forward and get it scheduled? And she might say yes. And then the last question is, so if I can show you a way that we can make this affordable and we can get this treatment going, would you get this scheduled? And would this allow us to move forward? So what you're basically doing is you're continuing to ask more of a question and pull away the layers of the onion so that you're getting to that true objection. And you can you have the way of getting the money figured out, or if she has a fear of, is this implant going to hurt me? You can use a feel, felt, found. Other people, I know how you feel. Other people had felt that way, but what they found was it didn't hurt and it felt like a natural tooth to them. So my point is that we sometimes think the objection is one thing and it's actually another. So using some masterful questions to isolate that objection and get it handled is the way you're going to get them scheduled.
I'd like to add some non-clinical context to those 4 steps, Kim. And it's that as a consumer, a dental consumer, I come to the dental practice to see the professionals to tell me what to do, to tell me what I need. And then if there's an issue with that, and maybe it's money, or maybe it's pain, or maybe it's time, or whatever it may be, I also look to all of you to help me overcome that so that I can get what I need. And somehow in dentistry, we've thought this idea that proposing treatment to somebody, even though it's what they need, is like a bad thing. But as a consumer, that's why I come to you. I trust you. You have training I don't have, and I really do want to hear what you have to say, and I want you to help me get there. Because as a dental consumer, I'm my own worst enemy, and you have to help me get out of my own way.
That's right. Absolutely. I think sometimes and also it's about giving so many choices. Sometimes in dentistry too, we give too many choices and then the patient is confused, and a confused person cannot make a decision. So always with Fortune, whether it's the reality check, whether it's the correction format, or these WMI questions, we're always teaching our dental professionals, all of you, how to ask great questions, because when you're asking the question, you are directing the conversation, and it's really a conversation with the patient. And your patients, we've talked to you about so many times before, they're your friends, you're in a relationship with them. And like Dennis was just saying, they come to you because you're the expert. So tell them what they need and ask great questions so that you can isolate what might be holding them back so that they can move forward with the treatment.
Perfect.
So that was really the leadership and the clinical director. Now we're going to move on to really, what do they need to know this week as far as the clinical director hat that they wear, Dennis?
So as the clinical director, you're starting to step out of this transitional phase that you've been into for the last couple of weeks. And the first step is we have to overcome our own fear. And we have to recognize that there may be some people out there in the world that still have their fears, but it starts with us internally. Do we have fears of bringing people back into the practice? Do we have fears of presenting treatment because there's all this bad news and stuff going on in the world? We have to be able to identify and then overcome any fears that are really getting in our way. And a lot of us kind of did this slow start thing where, we started out with just trying to get some patients on the books, and we had a lot of time in between our hygiene visits and our clinical visits, and we have more time available. And I know some of the hygienists on the call are loving the fact that their doctors have a little more availability right now. But it's really time for us to overcome all of those fears and know that you have successfully restarted the business. You've come back into your clinical roles, and you're operating at a capacity level that enables you to really kind of take things to the next level. So it's really important to revisit your basic systems and processes. So are you pre-appointing all of your patients? Every single patient that walks in the door. When we talked about the lookout role earlier in the day, one of the things we also want to do is the look back of what is every patient that either canceled yesterday or walked out yesterday without scheduling their next appointment. And we need to call them right away, because the sooner we call them to when they were just there, the higher likelihood that they're going to schedule on the first call, as opposed to waiting 6 months and it takes us 6 or 8 attempts to actually even get in touch with them. So really focusing on pre-appointing right now is critical, and getting back to your scheduling to goal methodology. And remember, scheduling to goal is not just about achieving your financial goals and hitting your BAM bonus. Scheduling the goal is also a way to manage energy and to ensure that everybody in the practice has an amazing experience, because adjusted production is the only way we can really measure the amount of effort and work that you're doing every day. And so the idea is not to have one grand slam day every single month. The idea is have consistency of days throughout the process so that you can manage that energy and manage the flow of your day. So stepping into this clinical director role, we've got to focus on these key 3 things, and then kind of take it to the next level in the next slide. And in this point, we really want to start returning to identifying what is the need that our patients have. And we had this 3-month period of time that a lot of us were only seeing emergency patients, right? And so we may have probably seen those emergencies, and we probably didn't even rebook them at the time, but we have all these people that should have been in there these last 3 months. That's going to create another hole 3, 4, or 6 months from now, because those patients weren't reappointed because they didn't actually come in for their appointments. So not only do we need to catch up and get them in for their first appointment, we have to determine all the patients that we have that we need to get rescheduled in the second half of the year, really the last quarter, September through December, and get all those patients on the books. And if you looked into your patient database, I'd be willing to bet everybody has 100, 200, 300 patients out there that are huge opportunities for September through November to get them back on the books. So while you're reaching out not just to get the last patient or the last visit that they missed because of the shutdown on the books, let's go ahead and get them rescheduled for all of them through the remainder of the year. Scheduling annually right now is one of the biggest things you can do to really gain greater control of your practice. You actually want to compile a list of all the eligible patients that are eligible to fill those holes that you're now going to have in September and November. Who are the people that should have come in this 3-month period of time? Who are the people that did not get reappointed as normal because they weren't there? And those are the people that we really want to be contacting to not only get back in now, but also to schedule for their second appointment. In this case, it's really important to be resourceful. And by resourceful, there's a couple of different levels of this. First off, recognize that recovery and rebuild and accelerating into the future, those are all team sports. This is not just your scheduling coordinator. It's not just your hygienist. It's not just the assistants. It's everybody on deck. Everybody putting forth some effort and being super resourceful and putting energy and focus into filling all those opportunities. So if we pull our active patient list and we find out we've got 300 patients that aren't scheduled for their next hygiene visit, let's get a list of that and actually have it up there and be recognized on it. And then the fourth point here is really monitoring the results. So of those 300 people, how many do we reach out to? How many did we actually get rescheduled? And make sure you're celebrating those wins weekly. And doctors, as the clinical director, this is of critical importance because your teams are working really, really hard to kind of get everything back to normal for you. And as a team, we have to recognize those efforts and we have to celebrate them. Or it sometimes can feel like we're just going through this drudgery of making all these phone calls. And yes, we're having some successes, but it's not recognized. The number one problem in most employment, not just in dentistry, but everywhere in the country, is a lack of appreciation. And appreciation is not just the doctor's or the clinical director's role. If you want an environment of appreciation, you have to be appreciative. So let's start with that, really monitoring the results of, are we fulfilling all of these opportunities? And then make sure you celebrate the wins every single week. As a team, acknowledge how much amazing things you've accomplished in this last week. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Kim?
Yeah, I love all of this. I think that really being proactive, if you've gotten anything from all these weeks, these 12 weeks that we've been doing these webinars, especially today, it's about being proactive. So also taking, when Dennis was talking about scheduling the goal, be taking a look at, do we still need to have 6 hygiene appointments? Can we move it to 7? When are we going to move it to 8, back to normal times? Are we using assisted hygiene? Are we using ghost hygiene? What we'd rather see you do, and I'd love all of you, especially you administrative team members, to be open-minded to maybe overschedule. You can always pull people back. In other words, you want to have you want to have the schedule full, or almost maybe 1 or 2 people more than you would actually be able to serve that day. So you can, if somebody does fall off the schedule or they reschedule, or you could do ghost hygiene, or you can move that person. The point is, you want to be more proactive than less. And we want to make sure that you don't miss a beat. Like this September through November, I know we have a lot of practices looking out in October and it's completely empty. So this clinical director system right here that you see on the slide is so essential to not have a huge dip in the fall. I want to say something about number 2. Remember, it's not just patients that would have been seen earlier this year when we were shut down. It's anybody who needs to be reactivated. Maybe it's 3 and 4 month recall patients, people that are on perio maintenance program. It could be scaling and root planing folks that need to come in for their second visit, whatever it might be, compiling that list of all the eligible patients. And then I so agree with what you said, Dennis, celebrate, because we want to make sure that we are continuing this momentum so that we go into next year even stronger. So this week we have some deliverables for you. Of course, we always have our checklist every week for the 12-week recovery program. We're also creating a treatment acceptance guide, which really combines a lot of the different material that we've been presenting over the last couple of weeks, with the questions are the answer, those really powerful, great relationship-based questions that we presented a few weeks ago, the 5 steps of enrollment that we just talked about now. And then also, if you remember, Shannon Richkowski talked about the TRIP hygiene assessment process, TRIIP, which is an acronym that the hygiene team uses. So really connecting doctors with your hygiene team to make sure that you're using all those elements of the TRIP hygiene assessment process.
Kim, I would like to celebrate some of the hygienists on the line today, because I know that when we first restarted, we were building in an extra unit every appointment and all this stuff, which consumed an entire appointment a day when you look at an entire column. And it only took about 2 weeks for all the hygienists to start coming to me and go, we don't need all that extra time. Let's go ahead and fill the schedule. And so I want to acknowledge all the hygiene teams out there and what a great job they're doing in getting back to normal operations.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think now we always have to disclaim, know your different states' requirements. Like I know here in Colorado, we've got some requirements around 15 minutes in between each patient for the operatory. And a lot of our practices have another operatory they can put somebody into. They're getting creative. I completely agree with you. There was a lot of uncertainty in the beginning, and I think that what we've done is we've helped you to create more certainty by giving you some great systems, and really acknowledge also all the doctors and their leadership and communication, and making all their team members feel safe and being proactive, because I know there's a lot of not being proactive and reactive folks out there. So we've been really focusing on this crisis equals risk and opportunity. Dennis, what would you say about this slide?
Yeah, so this week we're really in an interesting spot because we're actually trying to exit crisis mode. This week and next week are really going to be focused. Okay, now we are post crisis. So your biggest risk right now is that the impact that had in the last 3 months are going to show up again in 3 or 6 months. That a lot of the people that are resistant to coming back into normal care, that we're not going to be able to handle those objections and deal with those people. That our basic systems and processes that you spent so many years getting into play, pre-appointing and all of the reactivation efforts and all those things kind of get pushed by the wayside because of all these new things we're having to do. And so be aware that those are your primary risks of getting pushed off of center and being pushed out of the things that make you great in the first place. The opportunity again, and I want to accentuate the one that we pointed out 2 weeks ago, is really to get into deeper relationship with patients. While we've all been through this common experience and everybody's experience is a little bit different, everybody I ask is looking for more connection in their lives. So it's okay for you to be that connection point for them and really fulfill that role. And it is an opportunity for you to take things to the next level. So when we talk about things like the insurance enforcer, recognize that your ARs are probably cleaner than they've ever been before. Why don't we keep it that way? If we go back to 100% pre-appointment, why don't we keep it that way? You're at a perfect point when you're doing a reset to really accelerate into the future by implementing everything that stands for excellence. So that's your big opportunity for this week.
Absolutely. And just being proactive, like we've been talking about, and really thinking about these creative questions, whether it's the questions or the answer from a few weeks ago, or these WMI questions or the enrollment questions, and getting that deeper relationship. Because as you said, Dennis, what happens when people have great relationships with their dental teams? They refer their friends and family, and we're going to continue to grow and come out even stronger than before. And we always end on the law of attraction. Really the energy and the focus that you put out there, you're going to get back tenfold. So really focusing on this week, maybe I'm going to become even more of a master communicator and a master enroller. And I'm going to get excited about maybe asking some uncomfortable questions and putting myself out there, maybe role playing with your team so that you can have an even better result with your patients.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that, this week, really focus on your focus, because we've gone from 12 weeks ago having all of this stuff going on in the world, and now we can start to reduce that and come in to bring our focus into those things that are truly most important to us as individuals and to our patients. So if that's the one thing we do this week, is really refine our focus and fine tune it and laser focus it, that will be a huge win for everybody.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Dennis. It's been such a pleasure to present all this wonderful, great topics with you. Have an amazing day.
You as well, Kim.